Eventually, if Gordon Brown has his way, we'll all be pottering around in cars yay big. Noddy cars, your mum's shopping trolley. Call them what you will, but these economic and affordable mini cars could well be the future for the hard-taxed motorist. But would you like to be seen in one? Let's put 3 of the leading contenders to the street cred tests. With the Chancellor continuing to pile taxes on the price of petrol whilst reducing taxes on the running costs of these small cars, they start to make a great deal of sense. But once you've shelled out your £7,000 or £8,000, what will they be worth a few years down the line? After 3 years and 36,000 miles, we think that the Seat Arosa will be worth around 55% of its original costs. It's a high build quality, VW parts, and since you can run it on short change, you'll be getting quite a large lump of your money back at the end of it. Not quite the same for the Fiat Seicento. We think about 40 to 45% after 3 years. The build quality is not quite as good, and these orange parts and the grey might start to look a bit tatty after 3 years. Now, traditionally the Deus don't do well in the second-hand car market. Some people don't feel comfortable that there's no distributor backup. But because we think these cars are going to become increasingly popular in the future, there's going to be a strong niche market, and we do think they'll sell well. And this one, again, about 40 to 45% of your original costs. Next, it's the Tardis test. These cars are designed to feel bigger on the inside than they look from the outside. But do they? And even if there's plenty of space in the front, what are the implications for legroom and storage space in the back? The Seat Arosa passes the Tardis test well. There's loads of headroom space up here, and the feeling of space is really helped by the acres of glass. Huge windscreen here, and look at the size of the door windows too, which really gives it a nice airy, bright feel to it. Now, the driving position's comfortable, but I'm what, 5'10", and already the seat is all the way back. So, what must it be like sitting back there? It's not very comfortable actually, there's nowhere to put my knees. Well, as you'd expect on cars this size, there's hardly any boot space whatsoever, barely enough to put a couple of heavy shopping bags. But they are all flexible, and the Arosa is no exception, because the back seats flip forward so that you can actually extend the back space if you need to. The Seat Arosa has just about as much interior space as the VW Polo, and this configuration is probably the most practical way of using it. The Seicento also has reasonable head clearance for someone of average stature like myself, and the feeling of light and space here is helped by a small sunroof up here, but it's a bit fussy, and I don't particularly like the way that you open and close it with this twist wheel, which is all a bit fiddly. There are plenty of places to put things, but I think the design is lazy and rather ugly. Look at this great big grey bucket affair. You can throw lots in, but it's all going to slide around. And if we thought that the legroom in the back of the Arosa was small, just take a look at this. What's he talking about? There's loads of space back here, until you pull the seat down. If you're offered a ride in the back of one of these, remember that the bus can sometimes be a better alternative. Good grief. Boot space, small, about the same size as the Arosa, but again the back seat has this split fold arrangement, so with one half down, well, you can get a tiny passenger in the back and your week shopping, and if you put both sides down, well, it's not a bad little space actually. The Matiz is slightly narrower than the other two, and yet it still has the feel of a much bigger car, and that I think is due to the design of the front. The sloping windscreen means that you can't actually see the front of the bonnet, and there's this huge console area up here with loads of space, which reminds me of an MPV. And looking at the back, well, the seats look larger and more substantial than the others, and there does seem to be a bit more leg room. And look at this, tiny cars can still have 4 doors. The Daewoo Matiz is the winner of our Tardis test because the back seat feels like a proper one, and although there's not a great deal of legroom, it's better than the others. Now all 3 claim to be 5-seaters. Look, There are 3 seat belts in the back here, and we think that's rather optimistic. There's no way you get 3 adults in the back of any of them comfortably. In the back, split fold rear seats, of course, and the boot space, well, if anything, it's marginally bigger than the others. You just might be able to squeeze that extra carrot into your shopping. Apart from fuel economy, another great benefit of small cars is that you can park them easily. You can squeeze them into spaces that those big cars just have to pass by. So let's put that to the test. This is the Seicento. Reasonable visibility through the mirrors here so that you can see what's actually happening behind you. And this one doesn't have power steering, so that makes it just a little bit heavier to handle. But let me see how I do here between the other two. Good turning circles on all 3 cars too, and that helps. Easy, no problem at all. The Daewoo Matiz is the one that really feels like you're driving a much bigger car because there's so much space in here compared with the Fiat. But the fact that it feels like a big car is quite disconcerting because it certainly doesn't drive like a big car. It's only got 800 cc's, it's much more sluggish than the Fiat, so don't think you're going to beat many people off the lights. Very conservative styling here at the front, and I'm also a bit dubious about the gear shifts. I think when you're changing up and down, sometimes you're not sure whether you're in 3rd gear or 1st, so that's a bit sticky, I think. Oh, and one last thing about the hopelessly underpowered engine. It sounds horrible. What do you think? Listen to this. Engine or bicycle dynamo? Of the 3, the sporty little Fiat Seicento, is the one that most reminds me of driving inside a go-kart, right down to this small leather-clad steering wheel, which is quite good fun, and the fact that it doesn't have power steering. It has a really good turning circle, this car, but you have to work quite hard with it. Here in the city, it's extremely nippy. Despite the fact that it's only got an 1100 engine, you really can streak away from the lights with the quickest of them. Now, I know earlier I was critical of the buckets, these storage areas, which are rather grey and boring, but on the other hand, look at the styling of all these funky little knobs and dials. Look at that RPM gauge, it's absolutely gorgeous popping up there. Its Achilles heel, I think, is road noise. Even at this speed, 30 miles an hour, you can quite clearly hear the noise of the tyres on the road. And of course, as you get faster onto the open roads, then that noise gets really very loud indeed, and you have to crank up the radio in order to concentrate on it. The Seat Arosa has an unusual piece of styling which I quite like. You know how picky we all are about the colour of our car, and then we spend most of our time sitting inside it not noticing what colour it is at all. Well, as you can see, Seat have actually brought a lot of the exterior colour inside. It's unusual, and I think it works really well. Now, this car has the largest engine of the bunch at 1.4, but interestingly, it also has marginally better MPG figures. So in terms of power and efficiency, I'd say this is the car to go for. And also because that engine is slightly bigger, it performs best of the 3 out on the motorway. I drove this up from London last night, and 200 miles I suppose, and although the road noise gets quite high, it was quite a comfortable journey. However, at the end, of course, I got out and just had to shout at everybody because I couldn't hear a thing. Hello, nice to see you. Sorry I'm a bit deaf. Road noise on the motorway. That sort of thing. The Seat Arosa 1.4 has an overall cost per mile of just 26.9 pence. This comes with power steering and steering adjustment. It has an alarm and an immobiliser. The airbag's an option. Of course, it has a radio cassette and the split-fold rear seat. The Fiat Seicento Sporting 1100 has an even better cost per mile at just 22 pence. Again, you'll get an alarm immobiliser as standard, alloy wheels, central locking, electric windows. Of course, again there's a radio cassette, and this too has a split-fold rear seat. And the Daewoo Matiz SE Plus with its 800cc engine. Here the cost per mile is 23.3 pence. Again, with this one you get alloy wheels, power steering, central locking. Once again, there's an alarm immobiliser, standard on most cars these days. There's driver's and passenger airbag in the Matiz, electric windows too, radio cassette, and once again, for those space options, it has a split-fold rear seat.
I think they're quite nice, but they are small. I do prefer larger cars. From like a family point of view, I mean, getting all the kids in the back and all your stuff, it might be a bit of a squash. With the price of petrol going up as well, motoring is becoming much more expensive, so I think the more people you can entice into the smaller cars, the better it's going to be in general, because the roads are like extremely cluttered.
Yeah, it would be an embarrassment to me to drive one because I'm used to a bit bigger car.
I don't very much like that one. I think that's typically a woman's car, that one.
No, I think I'd have to maybe get in one and drive it before I could actually give an honest opinion, but don't look too inspiring at the front, no.
These cars are nippy, well-styled, fun, and at a third of the cost of an A-Class, they've got to be well worth looking at. The Seat Arosa, it's comfortable and quick. The Fiat Seicento, fantastic manoeuvring abilities. And the Daewoo Matiz with its dual airbags and air conditioning is our winner today. If you're looking to beat those motoring taxes, think small.
Lotus's gorgeous little Elise first sprang onto the market a couple of years ago, something like that, since which it has exploded with success for the company. They only anticipated building 750 a year. They're already building about 3,000 of these gorgeous little critters every single year. It's a measure of the scale of that success for Lotus that the building I'm standing in front of today is a technical centre. It's enormous, as yet empty, but very soon very full. Lotus are doing very nicely indeed, thank you very much. And so we come to the newly revised Elise. Well, the changes to the exterior are minimal, but it's a kind of minimalistic car. That's what you'd expect, so subtle things. The headlamps are faired in. It's quite a complicated thing to make this. The indicators are now a smoked finish. And if we wander to the back, the anoraks will notice that in future the new Elise has a little black strip here. That's because it's some boring, tedious, probably European legal thing. It's to do with the fact that it has a new rear wheel that's slightly wider and a new specially designed rear tyre. Then at the rear we've got a little wing here, which I'm told does work very well, and that's a good job because there is more power. In the middle here, nestling away, it's got the engine it was always supposed to have, everybody said, the VVC. That means more power, and that power is put to the rear wheels through a new close ratio gearbox, all of which means I'm sick of talking to you and I want to drive it, because that's what it's all about once you've got in. Next time anybody you're talking to who owns one of these things starts bragging about its capabilities, believe them. Believe everything. They might be the biggest pub bore you've ever met, but everything they say is true. It really does corner like nothing else you'll ever drive. It stops. The stopping power is unbelievable. And it really is all about communicative controls. And that sounds, "Oh, really?" But it is. Everything about the car talks to you. The steering is as direct as it could possibly be without being heavy. The brakes are precisely the same. They're non-servo. And the more you apply the pressure, it sounds obvious, the more it'll brake for you. But until you've really felt a proper braking system like this, you don't know what it's like. It's an absolutely astounding car to drive. We've got this new model. We've had a quick look at the changes. Why these changes? What are you trying to do to it?
We're trying to open the market up. We've had a lot of our present customers saying, "I'd just like a bit more power." So we've increased the power. We've changed the gear ratios, so they're a more sporty, if you can believe that, a more sporty type gear ratios, which is very, very well suited to the engine characteristics. And we've made subtle other changes throughout the car and made a new model.
Having said that, we've been tootling around the track at some speed with you driving, and I've had a little blast on the roads myself. I mean, we are talking about a pretty serious tool for racing, but you can use it on the roads, and it isn't frightening. You don't sit in this thing and think, it's a monster, it's going to hurt me.
No, we have a little phrase which says fun at 50. And that's no reference to my age. It's just it's a reference to the fact that it can be just fun driving at 50 miles an hour in a queue of traffic. But when you get the chance to explore the vehicle even on the road or preferably on a closed circuit, then the car really does come alive, and you really have this fantastic feeling of you being as one with the car.
Do you feel that this as a car is the truest to Lotus's roots, to what Lotus is about?
Oh, absolutely. I often say to people that if Colin Chapman was alive today, I'm sure he'd love this car.
As a company then, this is going to be a significant factor presumably in the future for Lotus, the fact that you are now producing a car that sells in significant volume by any count.
It sort of puts a stake in the ground of where we at Lotus are and where we will be going, the direction we'll be going in the future.
So what's next?
Wait and see.
For me, the beauty of the Elise, once you've got out, is in the detail. It is a tiny, lightweight sports car, obviously. It's not even that powerful when you look at it on paper, but of course, put in such a lightweight frame, it translates to an awful lot of power and an awful lot of fun. And it is those details around the car that make it just a delight. For instance, in here, and this would just make my life better, this door hinge, if you can see it, is an absolute delight. The amount of engineering and work that goes into making something like that means that every time I've opened the door in my day with this car, I've just smiled and felt happy. And that is just, for me, what the car's about. Happiness. It looks quite happy. It drives. It just makes you smile. I congratulate Lotus on building something that is more Lotus than anything else could possibly be. They really have epitomised everything Lotus in this car. The developments are definitely worthwhile. Subtle though they may be, they do make a big difference to the little car. And I wish them all the very best. We congratulate them on the fact that they're selling so many of them, outstripping even their expectations, and I'm sure they will do so in the future. At what? Under 30,000, well under £30,000. What can you buy for more fun?
When I was a little girl, I knew that my granddad's favourite make of car was Honda, and those things stay with you, don't they? Now, it wasn't that I thought there was anything wrong with Hondas, it's just that my granddad drove them, and he also had a tendency to wear woolly jumpers with leather patches on the sleeves. As I grew up, I discovered that Honda made some exciting cars, things like the NSX and cars with the words Type R after their names. But the big Hondas, well, they still reminded me of my granddad. Great, well-made cars, but not for me. Until I had to drive the 1,500-mile round trip to the Geneva Motor Show in a 1999 Honda Legend. The Legend is one of those cars that never quite hit the mark. The last model was criticised for being out of its depth alongside Lexus and its European rivals. So Honda listened to those criticisms and went all out to make sure that the 99 Legend could hold its head high. The styling is very similar to that of the previous model. Any changes are subtle. The bonnet's more sculpted and the front wings are more sloping. Overall, the new car is both wider and longer. The new bumper houses the fog lamps and there are new light clusters on the back. The whole look is very elegant and I had quite a few admiring glances when I was behind the wheel. And no, they weren't just from elderly gentlemen in woolly jumpers. Inside the cabin, you couldn't exactly call the design exciting, but exciting isn't necessarily what you want in a luxury car. You want a feeling of quality, and quality is what you get here in the Legend. There's wood veneer and plenty of leather. Everything is functional and it's well laid out. But the best bit about in here are all the gadgets that you get to make those long journeys as comfortable as possible. Things like air conditioning, cruise control, and controls for the stereo that are mounted here on the steering wheel. And whilst we're on the subject of the stereo, this one with a CD changer in the boot is one that you can actually use as soon as you see it. You don't need to study the handbook for a week beforehand, which is very useful. Now, of course, the Legend comes with a full electrics package and there is stacks of storage space. There's even a power socket hidden away in here. And where would we be without cup holders? There's plenty of space in here for both the driver and all the passengers, and if you flick this switch, it releases the catch to a huge boot. You can't complain about the levels of equipment that are all included in the price, which, by the way, is £34,100 on the road. As I said earlier, I've recently driven 1,500 miles in this car, and it wasn't the high levels of spec that made it so easy. I can honestly say I've never before truly appreciated how fantastic, comfortable and supportive seats were. Normally spending 7 or 8 hours behind the wheel of a car would leave you getting out with stacks of aches and pains, but I can honestly say I got out of the Legend at the end of the day and I felt fine. Another plus point for long journeys is the powerful 3.5 litre 24-valve engine. Its top speed is 140 miles per hour and 0 to 60 takes just over 9 seconds. Behind the wheel you can feel the changes that Honda have made. The steering used to be very light, but some subtle changes have made it far more positive and direct. The 4-speed automatic box responds well, and on the road the Legend really does feel surprisingly agile. But the best thing about being behind the wheel is cruise control. It's absolutely addictive. On long journeys, particularly on those long, quiet stretches of European motorway, all you need to do is set your speed, relax and sit back to enjoy the ride. And because this is a Honda, it's packed with safety features. Things like anti-lock brakes with electronic brake distribution, traction control, front and side airbags, 3-point rear seat belts and high-intensity headlights. This is one of those rare cars that makes the journey every bit as enjoyable as the arrival, and that's something that is now very important to me. Maybe I'm getting old, but I've got to say my granddad has got great taste in cars. But the woolly jumpers with the leather patches? Nah, I'll stick to the Legend and he can keep those.